everyone. Great to see you. My name is Gordon Walker, and I have the good fortune of being able to moderate this panel. I think you may know what the theme is for this one. It's called Courage to Act, Caring for the Care Partner. I think most of you can recognize the saying that you measure the quality of the healthcare system by the care you provide to caregivers. And in our previous panel, I think every person echoed that feeling. The act of caregiving is one that's done with love, it's done with commitment, but also with a lot of challenges. So the focus today is going to be how to take care of yourself at the same time you're taking care of someone else, and what benefits can come from that in addition to some of the challenges. Being able to help somebody is something we all want to do in life, I believe. So there are some benefits to being a caregiver, although, well, I'll say, for last year I've been a caregiver, and thankfully my wife's getting better, but the caregiver support group I have the good fortune of being in with Jesse and others. I go to them and I'm going, you guys are just amazing. How you can do this 24/7. And then they remind me that, Gordon, you're doing a great job, I'm sure, but your wife's going to get well. Well, in the case of their spouses, they're not going to get well. So it kind of brought me down to earth a little bit, but realizing that as Mrs. Carter, Rosalind Carter used to say, and I'm not sure I get this quote right, but Ellen kind of be able to help me with it. We're all affected by caregiving. We are either a caregiver, or the recipient of caregiver, or we're going to be cared for, or we will eventually give care to somebody else. And I think that is what we're going to be focusing on today, is how in the world of caregiving, we can help the caregiver care for themselves. And so with that, I'm going to turn to Paula and start us off here, please. Oh wait, one or two announcements first.
Yeah.
And I should have done this in the morning. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the CARE Act. This was passed in the state maybe 6 or 7 years ago. It was an initiative of ARP. But when your loved one goes into the hospital, you carry this card with you, and it identifies you as a caregiver. And before the hospital can discharge your loved one, they have to do three things. They have to provide the patient the opportunity to designate a family caregiver, inform the caregiver when the patient is to be discharged to another facility or back home, so we get sufficient notice that somebody is going to be discharged. And lastly, explain and demonstrate any medical tasks the caregiver will need to perform at home. And this is to prepare the caregiver for enabling somebody to come back and get well at home, and teaching them how to use a certain device, or maybe talking through medications, or whatever it might be. And these cards are out on a table out there, and I encourage each of you to take one of these cards and use it if you need to. So with that, I'll now turn it over to you, Paula. Thank you.
So thank you very much. My name is Paula Sherwood. I'm a nurse and a researcher. I'm also coming to you as the caregiver of a child with developmental disorders. And I'm also a secondary caregiver for my dad, who is in the moderate stages of Alzheimer's. And I'm just going to give a little shout out, Jill. I don't mean to embarrass you, but Jill Duffy from the Memory Care Clinic has been incredibly supportive to us, as my mom and I have been going through that. So I was a clinical nurse for a long time, and then I got into research, and I've spent the past about 25 years trying to figure out how to support family caregivers. A lot of my work is in neuro-oncology, so I do a lot with caregivers of people with primary malignant brain tumors, but a lot of that kind of creeps over into dementia, because when you have a brain tumor, you have a lot of the cancer type things, and then you have a lot of the dementia type things. And my particular area is looking at how the stress of being a caregiver wears you out physically. And so we know that there is a lot of stress that comes along, there are a lot of emotions that come along when you get that diagnosis and when you see things starting to happen. And when you go with your partner and get a diagnosis of either dementia or cancer or whatever it may be, your body goes into fight or flight mode. You have a stress reaction. And then, so your body, their reaction, their first thing is to say, okay, we're in for a fight. And so your body will pump out sugar to give you energy, and it jacks up your blood pressure, and it jacks up your heart rate, and it gets you ready for a fight. And if you go through a normal stressful period, like you go for a job interview or you go to a big event or something like that, when that is over, that stress response in your body calms down. And so you don't pump out the sugar anymore, and you don't pump out the epinephrine. When you're a caregiver, you are continually under that stress. And especially if you're looking at something that's going on for a long period of time, and things get better and then they get worse, and they get better and they get worse. Your body is continuing to pump out all of those hormones. And what ends up happening is that it wears out your immune system. And it also wears out your cardiovascular system. And so we know, there was an article actually that my mom sent me this morning by someone named Christian Kelly. And he actually explained this a lot better than I've been able to in the past 20 years. But he talks about a low-grade readiness that never switches off. Your nervous system is always on call for something to happen. So as a caregiver, you're always worried about what's going to happen if. And so what happens if my partner becomes aggressive? What happens if they start to wander? And even though they may not wander, they may not be aggressive, that worrying is always there. So it's like being on call all the time, waiting for that waiting for something to happen. And so your body is continually pumping up these hormones and preparing your body. And what we know is that caregivers don't respond to vaccines as well. They tend to get sick with the flu more often, and when they get the flu, they stay sick longer. They have a worse antibody reaction to disease, so when the disease tries to invade the body, they're not able to fight it off as well. There are higher risks of high blood pressure. Caregivers have 2 times the risk of cardiovascular disease. And there are even studies that say that caregivers that are undergoing a lot of stress have higher mortality rates. And what that's from is from kind of this continued pouring out of this fight or flight response. The other problem that we see is that caregivers put their own health on the back burner, right? Because if you are caring for a partner with some kind of medical problem, and then maybe you have all of your other duties as well, go into your PCP for your regular colonoscopy, your mammogram, or whatever it is, always slips down on the list, right? Because you have other things to do. So we know that caregivers don't go to the PCPs very much. We know that caregivers are more likely to forget to take their medication or have their prescriptions refilled. And one of the biggest challenges that I face as a researcher is trying to figure out how to help caregivers realize that that their physical health is important. Because to be a good caregiver, everything's focused on your partner. And it's kind of not how we in society look at that. So we do a lot of work trying to support folks in making sure that they stay as mentally healthy as possible, as physically healthy as possible. And the truth of the matter is that if the caregiver's health fails, then they may not be able to provide care anymore. And unless you have somebody in the wings, that provides a big problem. So kind of getting folks to realize that you absolutely have to take care of your own health. And there are many ways to do that, and we can go into that later if you'd like. It's absolutely imperative that you take care of your own health, because if you don't, then if you do take care of your health, you'll be able to provide better care, and you'll also be able to provide care for longer. I think I'll stop there.
Okay, I'm supposed to introduce you, but I'll introduce Ellen now. Ellen Phipps, many of you may know Ellen. I've known Ellen now, we just reminded each other of 30 plus years. She's currently the executive director of a great organization up in the Culpeper area called Aging Together. It does a lot of remarkable things for the city and the county surrounding Culpeper. I had the good pleasure and perhaps knowledge to hire Ellen back as the adult daycare center director at JABA back in, what did you say, 93 or 92 it was? Yeah, wow. Some of the good times. After that, she went on to hold a senior leadership position with the Alzheimer's Association, and she's currently founding member of the Blue Ridge Respite Advisory Council. So it's obviously wonderful to reconnect with Ellen. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and to Norman and Susan and to the Tom Tom Festival for providing this great opportunity to raise awareness of dementia, all aspects. I know listening to Paula just reminded me a good friend of mine, who shall not be named, many of you know, recently had to place her husband in a facility, and one of the things she said to me was that on day 2, she was able to take a bath and she slept through the night. And she didn't know the last time she had slept through the night because she said she was no longer on high alert. So everything you said, just really hits home. Aging Together is a nonprofit organization in Planning District 9, which covers Culpeper, Madison, Fauquier, Rappahannock, and Orange counties. And our mission is to connect people to communities and to resources to improve quality of life as we age. And our vision is for livable communities that actively engage and support older adults. And we're like a central hub and grassroots organization that addresses gaps in services for older adults, including caregiver support and education. I think one thing that we found, I heard this many, many years ago at a conference, and it really rings true because it's sometimes hard to reach caregivers because they don't often self-identify as a caregiver. I'm not a caregiver, I'm just doing what I need to do to take care of my wife, my husband, my mother, my father. I'm just doing what any good daughter or spouse would do. So when we try to reach out with caregiver programs, people don't necessarily take us up on it because they don't think of themselves as a caregiver. So we've had to try to be creative in how we can engage people and reach out to them. And some of the different things that we do to support caregivers, and I just think that with all of those statistics we just heard from Paula, it really is just so overwhelming. But I do think knowledge is power. And so we do try to help provide all of the available resources. One of the things we do is we created this regional resource guide for older adults in our 5-county region. And I can't tell you how many people are like, we need one of those in Charlottesville. But it just has everything from transportation to support groups to food access to warning signs of stroke, warning signs of Alzheimer's. It's just a great resource, and we purposely did a hard copy because we know that a lot of the folks in our rural area are not necessarily able to get online, not because they're not technically savvy, but because they're in a rural area, and that's sometimes a challenge, as you all know. Also in this book, we do list the support groups and respite options as well, financial planning, and we also offer some programs. We recently purchased a Ready or Not program at Aging Together, which is a program for folks. They go through like 5 months and they start talking about every eventuality as we age in the community, what might come up, and getting those conversations started. And it's a really great program. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with that. We provide educational webinars. A lot of times we try to do both in-person and webinars. A lot of times it's hard for caregivers to leave, so webinars can be very useful. We do a lot for dementia-friendly training and dementia friends. As you might have heard in an earlier session, we work closely with George at DARS and the Chamber with Amy. We have an annual dementia education conference that provides innovative strategies for caregivers as well, and we try to find the latest research. We've had Paula come and speak in our area, and she did a great job, and we got a lot of great information from Paula. We're a collaborative organization, and we work very closely with the Area Agency on Aging and Alzheimer's groups and DARS with George and other local organizations. And I think our message to caregivers, particularly for caregivers who are caring for people who are living with dementia, is to kind of join them in their world. There are some strategies that can make life a little bit easier. So if you're not trying to, bring them into your reality, if they're insistent that it's, summer outside and it's really winter and it's snowing, so what? Who cares? We join them in their reality, in their world. Using engaging activities has been a passion of mine, and I will say that that's so critical. And these are activities that help to maintain dignity and autonomy and build on the person's strengths. So I think a lot of times when we think about caring for someone who's living with dementia, we tend to focus on all of those things that the person can no longer do. But if we flipped that around and started to think about all of the things they still can do, they can still read, or they can still walk across the room, they can still throw a ball. And I'm sure Barbara's going to get into some of that stuff as well. I will share one brief story of my dad who had Alzheimer's the last 4 years of his life. And he was a family doctor and a very caring doctor who still did home visits. I used to join him on his home visits when I was a little girl. And when he was in the middle stages of Alzheimer's, we found an old otoscope of his. And I brought it to him. He was in a facility, and I brought it to him, and I said, "Dad, you know what this is?" And he said, "It's for the ear." And I said, "Yeah, right, okay." And he ended up taking it apart, and it was in a case, and the case had little, places for each part of the instrument, and he spent about an hour taking it apart and then putting it back together. And when he put it all together, and I said, "What are you going to do with it?" And he said, "Examine the ear." And I said, "So you're going to examine my ear?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "It hasn't been sterilized." So here he was, in the throes of dementia, and yet, that came out. And then another half an hour left to take it apart and put it back, kind of like a puzzle. But it had meaning to him because he connected to that, because he was a doctor and he remembered what it was. And so it was engaging and it had meaning for him. I think, though, as the disease progresses, other chores, daily chores like sweeping and gardening can be really helpful. Daily routine is really important, keeping some semblance of a routine. I think don't take it personally. I think is a message we try to tell caregivers. That can be hard sometimes. And have the courage to ask for help. I think just a few resources I just want to mention as well. And this is one of the things we do at Aging Together when folks call us or if they have our resource guide. We talk about the GUIDE program, GUID. I'm sure that somebody's going to have information about that here today. It's on the table. Alzheimer's Association, your Area Agency on Aging, respite programs, social respite models, support groups, online or in person, Virginia Lifespan Respite, Medic Alert, Safe Return, home modifications, elder care locator. I think one of the most common questions we get at Aging Together in terms of caregivers is, how do I know when it's time for a transition? And I think that's a pretty tough question, and it's different for everybody, of course. But I think, again, knowledge is power, so understanding all of the different levels of care. What is a special care unit, a memory care unit, nursing care, skilled nursing, assisted living? There's so much jargon, so really, understanding what the terms mean. Community Resource Finder is another great one, and Nursing Home Compare as well is a really good website to see their different ratings. You can see how different nursing homes have been graded and see what their deficiencies are. So I think that's it.
Great, thank you. Now I have to skip
Skip
Barb, because she told me to skip her. But you get to hear from her later. Next, Jessie Dean. Jessie is the founding member of our support group down in Ellisford. It's been going on 4 or 5 years roughly. She's also on the advisory council for Blue Ridge Respite, that you're going to be hearing more about. She took care of her husband for many, many years, and you'll hear from her about that. She has degrees in art history, which I didn't even know, so I'm going to give her some more volunteer work to do. Great. And I'll stop there.
Please do.
Thanks, Corey. Go ahead, Jessie.
I'm happy to be here today to briefly share my caregiving story and how I maintained my sanity throughout my journey. My husband and I retired to Nelson County about 12 years ago, and having watched his mother pass from Alzheimer's in her early 80s, the disease was on our mind, and we were starting to see little snippets of memory issues with my husband Steve, and sure enough, within a year he was diagnosed by UVA with minor cognitive impairment. He was 58. We were not surprised, we were devastated, but we agreed we would not despair. We decided that the reason that I married the man in the first place was because of his sense of humor, and that we needed to retain our sense of humor throughout this journey. And I think we did a pretty good job. Steve's progression was fairly slow. With an advanced degree in engineering, his executive function helped compensate for the memory loss he was experiencing. Over the next 5 years, we lived our life to the fullest. We decided we were going to have fun. We traveled, we hiked, we biked, we gardened, we entertained. We really just lived our lives because we didn't know what our future was going to look like. Funny stories that come to mind. I decided, so I wasn't going to be resentful of his disease, I started dragging him to my all-women's exercise class 3 days a week, because I knew at some point I wasn't going to be able to go to exercise class, and that I would be resentful. I started taking him to my nail appointments. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, he had more pedicures than I did. So we kind of embraced it, and we said, we're going to just continue to do the things we do, and I'm going to drag you with me, whether you like it or not. We had kept the diagnosis to ourselves and to immediate family because of the embarrassment of the diagnosis for him. He's a very reserved man, very shy, and so I agreed that we would kind of keep it close as long as we could. But I was noticing the changes over time. By 2021, Steve was 64, UVA diagnosed early onset Alzheimer's. So we could no longer keep it to ourselves because it was becoming pretty obvious. One of the big milestones that you hear about for people with Alzheimer's is whether they should be driving a car. And so I've been trying to manage that leading up to that early onset diagnosis. And he knows that I love to drive. He's not such a happy driver, so that worked out. But at one point at UVA, they advised that he have an evaluation done. And so he was a little resistant, and so I took him home and I said, do you really want to risk the embarrassment of failing that assessment? And he said, no, I don't. I don't want to have my driver's license taken away. So I said, okay, then we have to agree, you're not going to drive anymore. And he said, no, I won't drive anymore. So for the next 5 years, I hid the car keys. Another milestone was when we were at the doctor's. They asked Steve, what would you do if there was a fire in the home? And he couldn't come up with call 911. So the doctor turned to me and he said, you really can't leave him at home alone anymore. And our independence came to a screeching halt, his and mine at that point. We continued to do all the things we loved, but I had gradually taken on the role of managing everything, and those activities became more challenging. I learned to change the filter in the well pump, to test and swap out the car battery. My big accomplishment was figuring out how to unlock the bathroom door on an airplane when he has locked himself in and cannot get out. That was fun. I learned to anticipate and avoid triggers that would upset him. People who talked too much, people who drove irregularly, loud, crowded rooms, action movies. Those triggers started to contribute to our isolation. We still socialized with our closest friends and tried to have fun. Another fun story was up until a few years ago, Steve would cut our grass. We had a couple of acres, lots of grass, and he had a riding mower, and he'd go out there and go up and down, and I'd be watching from the living room as he's missing large swaths of grass. And I'd just wait, and it would take him several hours. And finally, when it looked like he thought he was done, I would go out and I would pretend I was the guy at the airport with the flags, directing the airplane to the assigned gate, pointing out the areas that he had missed. And so we tried to have fun with it, and he laughed at what could have otherwise been a very contentious exchange. But I would say that was the last summer that he cut the grass. Both of our children live on the West Coast, and we have no other family within easy reach. However, we were not quite on our own. After his MCI diagnosis, Steve and I had signed up for every UVA study for which we were eligible. And interestingly, they were all centered on caregiver health. And we knew that there wasn't anything we could do for Steve necessarily, and probably not for me. But we were trying to give back to the community and worried about our children. As Paula discussed, caregiver health suffers, and as you were describing that, I could feel the stress level, because I've been there. So anyway, over a few years, UVA ran us through the paces. We both had MRIs, we had several sleep studies done, blood work, cognitive testing, you name it. We also participated in the original UVA telehealth care coordination study. These activities gave us regular touch points with UVA, including the Memory and Aging Clinic. As a result, we were not feeling rudderless. We were fortunate to have these resources available to us. We've also been fortunate to have resources available to us in the immediate community of Nelson County. For instance, Here to Stay Wintergreen is a nonprofit officially established in 2021, and their mission is to provide services and programs to help the aging population stay in place. It relies on a cadre of volunteers who will drive folks to doctor's appointments, deliver meals, do minor home repairs, stop by for a chat, pick up groceries. Programs have included speakers who will come in to address all sorts of topics relevant to the aging population. In fact, last week I sat in on one where the gal was talking about decluttering and downsizing, and my takeaway was this Marie Kondo for old people.
In 2022, the leadership here to stay launched a caregiver support group for local dementia and Parkinson's caregivers. It was, and still is, a godsend. It provides an opportunity for caregivers to gather with others who are experiencing their own challenges at home. We share funny stories, frustrations, and solutions on a confidential basis. It meets once a month, and over the last 4 years, we've had guest speakers in areas of expertise, including legal issues, patient rights, caregiver health, and technology aids. As a group, the caregivers have also gone on tours of local assisted living and memory care communities. Eventually, in order for me to continue to attend those meetings, I found a volunteer here to stay who would come and hang out with Steve for a couple of hours each month. And I will say that was the first time I had ever asked for help. It was a milestone. Coming out of the support group meetings was a need for a program that would provide a much-needed break for caregivers. The Blue Ridge Respite Program was launched in the fall of 2024 and is still going strong, and Bart is going to tell you all about it. Steve loved going. I thought he's never going to go for this, all this silliness, but he was as silly and into it as they come. The activities are very fun, and he's always very upbeat at the end of each session. We had to go down for a nap whenever I picked him up. He was, tired. But I will say, and I see some of you back there, volunteers of the Blue Ridge Respite Program, you guys are just awesome. These are women and men who devote time and energy, have fun with the folks that are there with memory issues or Parkinson's, and I just can't say enough good things about the volunteers. Respite gave me an opportunity to go to doctor's appointments, get my nails done. I finally got a pedicure myself without having to worry about whether Steve was going to hightail it out of the nail salon. Do chores around the house that I couldn't do with him underfoot. And sometimes I just had a chance to take a deep breath and relax. When Steve was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he was concerned that I was going to send him to a memory care unit right away. I promised him that I would take care of him for as long as I could at home. Fortunately, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that looked like. Thankfully, it took a while before I had to figure that out. It was a wait-and-see approach. I was confident that I would know in my gut when the time was right. After 11 years, Steve's condition had progressed to the point where he would no longer be eligible to attend the respite program. They don't have nursing, they don't have toileting, or anything like that, and he was starting to really slide. Although I felt like I could take care of him at home, I knew deep down that it would be to my detriment. Our children, who were watching all of this from California, always said to me, "Mom, there's nothing we can do for Dad other than to keep him comfortable, but you have to survive this." And so it was their pressure and my gut that I knew that the time was right for him to go into memory care. And I would say that was the hardest decision I ever had to make in my life. So he's been at Linden House since September. All is going well. Since then, I've experienced many different emotions: fear, grief, worry, but always offset by a reduced level of stress and much better sleep. I started dreaming again. I hadn't done that in years, and you don't realize that you're not doing it. I say I'm still Steve's caregiver, even though he's in memory care, but I serve as his advocate, making sure that he's well taken care of and that he's content. I continue to hang out with my support group friends and my respite caregiver friends. They get to unload, and I try to be a positive influence, sharing my experience as they look to the future. When I think back over the last 12 years in the context of courage, 3 events stand out for me. First, the courage it took my husband to admit that he was having memory issues and to seek an early diagnosis. The courage for me to actually ask for help finally, after too many years. And finally, the courage for me to take the leap and place Steve in memory care. My parting message is that caregiving isn't for sissies, but caregivers should be courageous and seek help often. Find a local support group and/or respite program. Ask friends to lend a hand. You need to be emotionally and physically at the top of your game to take care of your loved one and to survive the journey yourself. I know that's easy to say. From my experience, it's very difficult for caregivers to find the time and energy to think beyond getting past the next hour. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Glad Barbara gave me enough time to do it. Next is Sue. I'm going to say a little bit about Sue. It was her idea to have these panel discussions today. She and Norman felt that there was a way Norman could get back to the community, and this was one way of doing that. So, Sue, thank you for that. Sue has been the executive director of the Serendipity Serenity. I'm sorry, I keep calling it Serendipity. The Serenity Ridge Retreat Center in Nelson County. It is there to preserve the teachings and practices of the Buddhist tradition, integrating Tibetan philosophy into Western culture. She has a background in finance and a master's in depth psychology, which I must say I'm not sure really what that is, but Sue's going to share with us her experience of being a caregiver and a convener of bringing good people together.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So, and thank you, Jesse, for that very moving description of your experience. So I will share a little bit in preparation for this, kind of reflecting on the last few years of my journey with Norman.
Could you
Sitting
speak
here.
up, please?
Yeah. I've been reflecting on my experience the last few years with my husband Norman, for what I will share here. So Norman was diagnosed in 2020, for those who didn't come to the earlier program, with posterior cortical atrophy, which is a rare form of Alzheimer's. And it begins with visual impairment. And at the initial stage when he was diagnosed, there wasn't much information available. The information we read was that either it's going to go into memory loss and Alzheimer's or it's not. And so at that time, it was very unknown. Like, the future we envisioned just suddenly broke apart, but there was a very unknown where it would land. And then Norman was always very, very active and very healthy, and so suddenly to have this diagnosis was a shock. And so in the way of asking for help, I didn't. And there were a few areas why, as I look back. And I think one was the shock of the diagnosis. We needed time to process it, both together and individually, of what it meant for us. And so with that, there was some grief, some sadness, and also realizing any rhythm that we'd had to change because the unknown was, we were walking into the unknown. Things kept changing of how the vision impairment was affecting him and what we needed to do to accommodate, and that has kept continuing. And so just life felt very unpredictable, and of course it was right with the pandemic, so the timing was, that going on, and then our personal lives just sort of upended. And so we did tell Norman's kids, we told family, but we chose to not tell people. And I think it was to give us space to get used to it. And that was another reason for not asking help, but another reason is this stigma And I think that was one of the inspirations for having this day, is that that stigma really affects what you're able to do and ask for and how you can reach out. And it shouldn't be there, right? This is aging, it's normal, and that the fear of judgment that is the overlay of that stigma stopped us from reaching out in ways that, as I look back, we could have, but chose not to. So we would tell people Norman has a visual impairment. That was the language we used. That's all it is. And it's difficult, but, you know, but, yeah, and so that's, and so, yeah, so our hope is that having more conversations out in the open can help break the stigma. So then back to the asking for help. And I want to say, I heard Paula speak at one of the caregiver groups in Nellis Church a few months ago, and that really made an impact on me to hear the clinical evidence, medically, what happens, as more of a recognizing the absolute importance of it. Because it's easy to say, oh, and now I need to take care of myself, but then to actually do it, it's always like, oh, tomorrow, I'll take care of it another time. But that was really helpful. So I'm really appreciative of the work you're doing and that you arranged to have Paul speak and that I was able to hear it and hear now. So asking for help is a whole realm for someone who thought of herself always as being very introverted and shy, and maybe because of both of those things, I would just take care of things on my own. I wouldn't ask for help. And that feeling like, okay, Norman and I will do it. We can do this. We'll do this. And so from a very wise person who I know, and talked about, look at how you think about yourself and how that limits what you are able to do, what actions you're able to take. And so I realized that this way that I considered myself was the very barrier for me to speak up and out and ask for help. And so, so this time has been a lot of exploration of internal, how to break free of my own blocks. And then one day, I remember it very vividly, I was going for a walk, and I thought, well, where I work, there's a lot of community there that I've always felt connected with. But yet here we live right in downtown Charlottesville, and I thought, wow, I don't feel connected to this very place where I live. And that I was missing kind of a larger sense of community here in Charlottesville. And so just more working in myself, trying to shift. And then, out of that came this day and the inspiration for it. And so I realized that I can't manage alone. And through also Liz's talk at the caregiver group helped get us connected. So now we have our care coordinator, Sam, who are so thankful for it. UVA Memory Care, it's an amazing service. And that we get to talk once a month and feel that support and feel that we're not alone. Kind of normalize the experience and get some wonderful suggestions. And then, as far as friends, realizing reaching out to friends for support, and many of them are here now. We have a little friends group that are great support, and it came out of, I wanted to go away traveling for a few weeks And Norman's kids are great, and they will help and come and stay. They live in distance, but they'll come and stay, take turns, and hang out so I can go away. But I had a good few days where there was no ability to stay with Norman. And so we worked out a schedule, and it's just saying, I'm going to ask this, make this request. You can say no if you want. So we had kind of our ground rules, and they all came forward and helped. And so we managed to piece together that they all took care of them. And then I was able to have that time for myself, which, like you've heard, it's really needed to just, yeah. So, yeah. And so I'd say the same with where I'm now with physically taking care of myself. I have never taken care of myself with exercise my entire life, so it's not like Norman, like me being a caregiver role, it's like changed anything. It's just, I always, but I gotta work on it. So that's but I'm working in it in the same way as the other. I know that things I can change, and I know the importance of it, and so that's a process that's happening. And so I feel like in the way that you, Jesse, chose that you were going to meet your situation with humor as you were able to, I feel like, with Norman and I, we're always trying to strategize and make good, improve and ease what's going on. But I also feel like I want our life to be joyful and this not get stuck in feeling sorry for ourselves in the situation, that this is part of life. And here we are, and that we can have a full life together, even though our roles are shifting and there's a lot that goes on with dementia and support for it. But it doesn't mean that, the love is there. Norman's questionable sense of humor. And that through the experience, there's a lot of opportunities for personal growth and together, and that's how we're choosing.
Thank you, Sue. I would like to say that listening to you and Jesse, and how the role of caregiving helps you figure out who you are as a person, it just really hits home. And maybe if you aren't caregivers, I think you have the opportunity to find that out. But with that said, Barbara Shuffleton, she is the program director for the Blue Ridge Respite Program, and she'll talk about that. She's an ordained Presbyterian minister, and prior to relocating to Nelson County, was a hospital chaplain in Ephesus. And we were quite fortunate to be able to hire her, and she wanted to live in a rural area, and so for a program in a rural area, we've got an exceptional person to do the job. So please go forward.
Thank you. And I had no idea what I was saying because I grew up in Atlanta. So I thought, I've seen rural on TV, I know rural. Our 25-year-old daughter moved in with us after we'd been up here a few months, and the fact that she can't get to Chick-fil-A for 30 to 40 minutes is the biggest crisis on the planet for her. So I'm still learning a whole lot, including lack of transportation, lack of resources, and that you really have to be able to drive to get anywhere, and to get any help, groceries, whatever it is. But I love the community. I spent 18 years working in a church, 18 years working in a hospital, and I love those jobs. This is the best job I've ever had. And it speaks to me, and it really feels like I'm making a difference.
So the program was envisioned out of the support group, and Gordon, I don't even know how you got connected to Respite for All, which is a program that started in Alabama. And it has a model that we followed, and then we've adapted it to make it our own over the year and a half, 18, 19 months we've been open. But it's a place where originally 2 days a week from 10 to 2, people would come to Rockfish Presbyterian Church, which we needed a church. I'm a minister, but it's a secular program. And that was very intentional so that everyone felt they were welcome there and that nobody was there to be preached to or converted to something or the other. It's a non-medical program, so we do not do medications. If someone needs to take a medication during the time that they're with us, we can remind them, but we can't dispense medications. I'm the only employee, everyone else is a volunteer. And so we're not going to ask that of them, and it changes all the regulations if you go that direction anyway. They have to be able to take care of their toileting issues. Again, there's reminders. Every time we take a break, it's like, hey, go hit the bathroom, get something to drink, some water, and we'll meet again over at these tables. So there's things that we can do to remind, but that is a big limiting factor. It usually means that we have folks in their mild to moderate stages that are there. Once they come, after those first few times when they're quite reticent about being there, they have become their own community, their own family and friends. And one of our guys was, "Hey, friend," as he saw each person coming down the hall. And they look for each other. Well, where's the dancing guy? Steve. Steve was known as the dancing guy because, and quite the surprise to Jesse, no he doesn't. Every single time we're together, spontaneously, if there's music going on, he dances across the room. And that was, I love that. I love that. So we do movement. We have a wonderful woman, a master in Tai Chi, who comes to us once a month and is taught us about our core and movements. She's also taught us Japanese. We can count to 10 in Japanese and say another half dozen words, and we use that every single time we meet. We do chair yoga, stretchy bands, all sorts of ways. We are intentional about making sure that they get up and move regularly throughout the day. They're not sitting too much. We do music every time we're together. We have wonderful groups that come in and provide various music, banjo playing, a trumpet player, a group, Jimbo and Kim Carey, who apparently everybody knows, that come in they play everything between the two of them, every kind of guitar and banjo and et cetera. And they also bring instruments in for us to play along, and they get us up dancing. And it's not just to sit and listen. We're not looking for that. We're looking for something that we can be involved with. And our folks sing along. I think music is one of the most powerful things that we can use with folks as they're dealing with memory issues. My dad sang in the choir always. And one of the greatest gifts that he got is that they would come to Sunday school when he was well into dementia and say, "Come on, Ted, let's go up. It's time for choir." And he would stand up there, and if he didn't know it, he stood up there with a big smile. But most of the time, he remembered it from long ago and could sing still with his beautiful tenor voice all the way through. And that was the last thing he was hearing before he passed was music. He couldn't say my name or my mom or sister's names, but when the music came on, he sang. So I strongly believe that that's important. We have 30-second dance parties regularly where I just put on something wild and we dance. So as we go to the next table, please dance your way over there. We do art. We do a lot of service projects, and I'm very grateful for one of my volunteers who's my coordinator for that. We make dog treats for the SPCA. We make horse treats for Hope's Legacy. We fill bags for teachers for appreciation. We just brought 20-something bags to the Cancer Center for those who are going through chemotherapy, of having a bunch of supplies, homemade Afghans, wraps, snacks, etc. We do things for service members. Anyway, we do at least 2 service projects a month, and part of that is a number of the caregivers have said he was always so active. He was a giver, he was a doer, he worked with Habitat, he did all these sorts of things, and letting them know that they can still make a difference in the lives of others by participating in these service projects maintains their dignity and their sense of importance in what they can do. And truly, the pride that they feel when I show them the recipients' face when I got the best picture of a mule. Well, Dana took it for me when it got some of our horse treats. So that's very important. We play Wordle, our connections, our own versions of them. We do This Day in History. We do, famous birthdays and all, and I have a PowerPoint I do each time and put the pictures up there, and we work in coming up with the name of who that was or when that happened. And a lot of it's from before they were born, but it's like, have you ever thought about how this ever got started? Well, in 1882 and so forth. Our members range from 67 to 91, and most of them are cared for by a spouse. We have 2 that are now in that sandwich generation. One young woman has a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, a husband, a dog the size of a horse, her mom's little dog, and now her mom living with her and her husband. And so that's raised all sorts of different things for us to take into account. Another one who lives with her 14-year-old son and her mom. So the caregivers and what their needs are. I love meeting with them. I meet with them at the church on top of the group that Gordon runs. And watching them become their own support group is wonderful. And even though Jesse's husband has gone into memory care, she has been a vital lifeline to our other caregivers. And they get together, they drop their people off with us, and they go down the street to Belty's and have coffee and a biscuit and say, I don't know what I'm going to do. Yes. And they share tears and laughter and, oh my gosh, can you believe? They all go, yep, we can believe. We've all been there. But Jesse's the kind of helping folks walk through the next steps, and the support they're giving each other is huge. I've been volunteering with Alzheimer's the whole time I was in Newport News because of my dad, who was early onset also. I'm a strong believer in saying it out loud and not hiding it. Of when you're ready, of letting you know, because it's not, that's this person with dementia. That dementia doesn't define you. It simply is something you have. I have cancer. I'm not Barbara the cancer patient. I'm just Barbara. Dementia is the same. It doesn't define who you are, who you've been, and who you will become. So as soon as folks are ready, say it, because we've got to get that stigma out of there of not being able to say that out loud, because that's so isolating. And folks need to have the freedom and the support that they will get when they say, this is what's going on, I need help. So please share it. Tell your family first, and you're going to need them more than you think. Make sure they get out and spend at least multiple days in the household with primary care help, so they'll understand what you're going through as a caregiver. I think one of the other big things is by having our group, which by the way now meets 3 times a week, because the caregiver said, we want more. And we just opened a second location on the southwestern part of the county at the Nelson Heritage Center. They meet on Thursdays. They're having their 3rd meeting today. And so we're growing that way, and eventually they'll be open on Tuesdays. So somewhere in Nelson County, 5 days a week, we will have respite care available. I forgot where I was, time apart. Some of the caregivers are like, I'll stay and make sure he's okay, because I really don't think he's gonna like this, he's not gonna wanna be here, etc. And after the spouse leaves, a few of the caregivers, a few of the members say, God, I'm so glad she's gone. They need a relief from you, because you're the person who has to say no. And we try to not say no. We meet them in their reality, and a lot of times it's a whole lot more fun than the one that we're in right now. So time apart, not just for their own support, but also because when they've been isolated in their homes, that community that is formed is vital. I want to give time for everybody to ask questions. The biggest thing I hear from caregivers is the guilt that they feel, that whatever they've done, it's not good enough. I've told all of them, I'm a minister, I can give absolution, forget it, let it go. Anger that the world that they were imagining for their retirement years or their older life together is different. It's changed, it's gone, and they have to come up with a new one. Grief, you all know, you've heard of the long goodbye, and through each stage, as each change happens, as each skill is lost, there's a grief, and we need to be able to share that. My volunteers are the only reason that the program is as successful as it is. And in helping do some grant writing with Gary and Janelle, I found out that one volunteer hour is worth $34.67 or something like that. We're having a volunteer appreciation event soon, and I'm going to add together all of the hours that they spend, because it's not just the 5 hours they're there for the setup and the cleanup. One goes grocery shopping and make sure that we have enough apples and peanut butter and coffee available. They do planning of art projects and other things. They call their friends and say, hey, can you come and be a speaker? They love these folks as much as I do. So we couldn't do it without them. Thank you.
Well, we certainly want to give opportunity for questions or comments. Yes, sir. Please.
Question for Barbara. Are all of your people with cognitive challenges, or do you have other types of people?
Thank you. We have, we're open to those with any kind of dementia, including Parkinson's. And we do have 2 folks that have Parkinson's, one with some dementia and the other without dementia at this time. And by the way, the Charlottesville Ballet is going to be with us for the next 3 Mondays in May, doing a movement of Parkinson's. So we're inviting other folks to come in and do that. But they also provide an extra layer of understanding and help about the body movements and all. So we're glad to welcome them.
Yes, ma'am. Well, here comes the mic.
Thank you, everybody. Is this working?
Yes.
Okay. I am grateful to know that there has been so much change. 25 years ago, there was nothing for me. When my mom was in dementia and I was working full-time, and I am tearful. partly because of the lack of things for when I needed them, but also an appreciation for people who are needing them now. I have one question in this guide, Caregiver 10 Commandments. The first one, agree, never argue. I'm helping a friend with Alzheimer's. I spend Wednesday afternoons with her. There are a group of us who share responsibilities. What do you do when, by agreeing, you're putting somebody in a place where they're not safe?
Good question.
I was going to say the only reason that you need to argue with them, and not argue, but it's a safety issue. But other than that, go to their reality. You know, who cares if they think their mom's picking them up in an hour and they're 82 and that's probably not going to happen. Who cares if they think it's raining outside and it's not. Go where they are, but if it is a real safety issue, then it has to be addressed. But there's also ways of distracting and changing the conversation and so forth.
Yeah, I think, to your point, redirecting, I suddenly was reminded of all those years ago when I was in the adult day center with Gordon at Java, and there was a woman in our program, and she would become very agitated and insist on, you open up that door, you know, and she was getting very agitated, and I would say, you want to go outside? And she said, yes, open that door now. And I said, okay, I want to go outside too. But I was going to have some ice cream first before I went out. Would you want to join me over here? And she'd be like, and I knew she loved ice cream as much as I did. So we would be able to kind of redirect. And then, you know, eventually, we weren't eating the ice cream, she forgot. Or if we had a staff person that could go with her, it would be fine to go out. But that was a good, like, you know, it was a real safety issue. She couldn't go out by herself. It would have been a real safety issue.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Yes, sir.
I guess one question that I would
Here's a mic.
I think I've talked about that. I'm a caregiver, and I came here because I've never really had a problem asking for help, but I have had a problem like finding useful help.
Yeah.
And so that was really what drew me here, is to find out, well, like, what's all this help that we should be asking for and not able to find. So the Here to Stay program, that was the first time I've heard about that, so I jotted that down. And I think this was the first time that I heard of the Blue Ridge Respite program. So I jotted that down. So I guess one question for the whole panel would be, what would you all say is the, you know, some of the resources that we might not be aware of? I've looked at the Java stuff. My particular situation, I guess I'm fortunate in that my partner's not that far along now, but going to one of the panelists spoke to, what she really needs is like more friends to help her out. But the first thing I did was call all her friends and said, she needs help. And so a lot of, you know, they all said, of course we'll be there. But really only two really show up. And what she really needs is another couple of wing women. And that seems to be impossible to find, or even just a ride to get her to a place where she has a room. But I'd be interested in hearing from you all, like, what would you say would be your go-to resource that I might not have heard of, or other people in this room? And how do you deal with those people that are in the early stages?
Do you live in the Charlottesville area? Are you in
Yeah,
Charlottesville?
this is Charlottesville. Do we have a good resident care in Charlottesville?
No, you have an adult day healthcare center that is at Java,
Yeah.
Sunflower Java, but that's a medical model of adult respite care. The program in Blue Ridge Respite Program serves Southern Albemarle and Nelson County, but we would take people from Charlottesville. Occasionally, Norm and Sue have taken advantage of it, and they're here in Charlottesville. But we realize we're 35, 40 minutes away too. So, to help with the question you have, and I may call on, I think George is still here too, is there's a senior navigator is a website to go to, and it will list all kinds of resources that are available in different areas of Virginia, but also specifically to the Charlottesville area. I would also recommend, I don't work there anymore, but going to Java and talking to one of their information and referral people, or perhaps George, I mean, is there anybody else really in the Charlottesville area that?
Well, I'm putting a plug for our new state website called dementiacapablevirginia.org. dementiacapablevirginia.org. It's really meant to be a starting point, and it has lots of referrals depending on what you're looking for. I will say we're trying to support social respite programs like fluid respite across the state. There are a few, there were hardly any 2 years ago, so there's about half a dozen now, which is exciting, but clearly not enough. Neighbor Force.
Neighbor Force is another good one that some of my families have had success with, and they don't have like you don't have to have 8 hours a day. You can say Neighbor Force. You can Neighbor Force. NABOR. Neighbor Force. And you can just like arrange rides. You don't want to do jaunts because sometimes that can take a long time to get on jaunts.
The other thing I would encourage is how much you can learn by being a member of a support group. And I know there's 1 or 2 support groups in Charlottesville. I couldn't tell you what the schedule is, but I think there's some information out on one of the tables there about that. But people that have had to navigate this network of services, I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, there's a lot of nonprofits out there, and there's a lot of people, and it's really challenging to navigate that system. But I do find that a support group of some form would be incredibly helpful for that. I mean, that's what we discuss on a regular basis, is how can we help people get access to the resources they need. And people have figured it out, but it's challenging, I certainly said.
When people have talked to me in terms of friends and family, there are 2 things that I hear almost on a regular basis. One is friends and family want to help, but they don't have any idea what to do. Caregivers need help, but they don't know what to ask for. So there's that disconnect. The other thing that I hear often in where I am is that there's some friends and family members that are very comfortable with dementia, and there are some that are just not. And so, and it doesn't mean that they don't want to help, it just means that they're not comfortable being in that space. And so trying to figure out specific tasks that, can you take, can you take someone to soccer practice, or can you go do the grocery shopping, and I'll give you the list. Things that maybe where they don't have to physically be in the same space because they're uncomfortable with it. And those are 2 things that I hear very often.
Hi, my name is Marianne, and I work in home care. First, I'm here because I really love the idea that there's many of you that are living with loved ones that have memory loss and cognitive changes, and how can we be advocates? How can I hear my friends and gather people to be there so that change can happen? And so I just really found today just so encouraging, and just like really, I just love our community. Because I work in home care, we get this question a lot, because you can have hourly care, it gets expensive, but I always point to the community members that call us to a few resources. One, of course, is Java. They have resource folks that will answer your questions if you have, if you need specific resources. They have a list, and so they're not recommending, but if you need a few phone numbers, they can help, because for seniors, Googling and all that, that's just a lot, right? Of course, we have the center at Belvedere, and I cannot express enough what a big resource that is. The Center of Belvedere, there is a membership, but they also have scholarships. So if you can't afford it, or if your loved one might just want to try it out, they have that. There's a lot of free programs there. They bring guest speakers. There's like art, there's music. So just in terms of socializing, even for an hour, you know, you can sit in the lobby and sit at the cafe and listen to the music. And there are other seniors with loved ones that have dementia or Alzheimer's, and they are just socializing and having a lovely, lovely time. Many of my friends here, we have a memory cafe once a month, and it's Friday, the third Friday of the month, and we have a program, and it's a different theme. We try to go with the month. Like for February, we had a very fun time doing the newlywed game with some of our couples. And it was just lovely. And again, just normalizing fun socializing. The other resource I would say is there's something called cvillevillage.org. And so for some of you in the community that might know it, it's very similar to maybe here in State Liberty, right? It's very similar. So there's a small membership fee, and there's a list of volunteers and rides, helping with like the yard work, helping with small chores. You can go to the community and ask, you know, I need help with this or this. And it's not like you're signing up for 4 hours, maybe a couple hours, and you have a list of volunteers. You can also be a volunteer. The challenge is it's only Charlottesville. So when I have somebody calling from Greene County or from they still have that meeting. It's not that wide and network. But if you're in Charlottesville proper, it's cvillevillage.org.
Talk to me about the memory cafe, because I'm aware of that. I'm trying to talk my partner going to it.
I am going to point to my lovely friend for how about our memory cafe?
Yeah. So it's once a month at the center. It was an hour and a half. And so there's couples who go. So the person who's having memory challenges and their partner. Some are singles who go. And so it's just a chance to socialize in a very relaxed setting after there's coffee and snacks. There's usually music playing. We've got some different activities each time. That's one of the other coordinators. And so, yeah, so we've met some really nice people through that.
Now, there is also a flyer out there on the table about a series that Centera is doing during the month of June, from 5 to 6, about empowering the caregiver, which I think would provide a lot of good information about what's available locally. Not all I know about it, but I'm sure it's going to be a great learning environment there. Any other questions, comments from anybody out there? Okay.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for being here, to have enough interest in somebody's services. And of course, the wonderful group we have here, we're going to go on the road. Did you know that? You want a new activity in your life? Thank you. Godspeed.